welcome back to StabilityWOD. I'm gonna do one last day of talking about multifidus, and then I'm ready to move on, and we're gonna come back to it for sure because it's so relevant to a lot of problems. But I wanted to bring the rower into it today because I work with a lot of people on rowing form, not because I want to make them Olympic rowers, more because I want them to be able to do it for exercise, and I want them to stay healthy while they're doing it. So it's important to note that rowers at a high level, just like in any sport, tend to sacrifice their bodies in some way to perform better. So in the case of rowing, generally that means that the lumbar spine goes into flexion in order to increase the length of the pole so that the rower can get the maximum amount of pull out of every stroke. And so a lot of these high-level rowers, as fit as they are, they end up sacrificing the discs in their back and other body parts in order to row at a high level. When I see people in my clinic, a good example today, a client who had some osteoarthritis in her knee, which meant that she could only allow her knees to bend so much before she started to feel pressure. And she also has to protect her low back because if she comes in too far and she loses lumbar neutral, her multifidus has a hard time stabilizing, and she puts her back at risk for a flare-up. So I'm going to share with you what I shared with her, an initial strategy to help her find a better body position while she's on the rower, but also still be able to perform at a high level. One of the things about multifidus that I haven't shared is that it can actually do work in flexion, extension, and rotation. It can work out of neutral. However, the lumbar spine is the strongest and most powerful when it's in neutral. So when the weight gets heavy, or when the volume gets high, the repetitions get high, that's when multifidus is at the most risk for losing control of the lumbar spine and then us flaring up. And the rower is a great example of a high repetition, relatively high force activity that puts the lumbar spine under enough strain that if we do enough meters of rowing out of neutral, we're going to start to break down. Whether you're a CrossFitter, whether you're using the rower for fitness, whether you do Orange Theory, the rules of rowing biomechanically when it comes to preventing injury and staying healthy are always the same. This is what I shared with this client today when I was trying to help her get back on the rower so she could stay active as she's healing her knee, as her back is calming down. I want her to stay in the gym, I want her to stay in the community, and I want her to stay as active as she possibly can be. And the rower is a great way for her to do that. So this is what I saw when I first watched her row. I'm just going to do an example. You can see a couple things. My knees are caving in, my low back is rounding. And if you were squatting, and really the rower is just an exaggerated type of squat, if you were squatting, this is not the position you want to see at the bottom of your air squat. So the first thing I did was say, hey, let's open up your knees. Let's take them apart. Let's open up some hips to get open up your hips to get some space, so you can actually get in to the catch position without your knee feeling like it's under so much pressure. And her medial compartment of her knee hurt a lot more here than it did out here. So while biomechanically it'd be nice to have her knees over her toes, opening up her hips actually allowed her knee to track in a little bit healthier position like it would during her two-leg squat. First thing we did was pattern in a little wider knee position, which keeps her feet in a more powerful position, helps her knees track better, opens up her hips, and the nice side effect of this is it allows her back to stay in a more neutral position at the catch, so she doesn't have to flex to get to that catch. She can actually stay erect, have her back in neutral, have her multifidus firing as she initiates that pull. So I'm hitting the catch. I'm still in my neutral lumbar spine. And then I can initiate the pull from there. Very strong position compared to a longer pull, but a relatively riskier position for my lumbar spine. So here's a back view of my lumbar spine position. This is before. This is with knees together, lumbar spine in. You can see I'm going from neutral at the back of my pull to flexion at the front of my pull. And flexion is where I get my discs into trouble. It's where I lose stability with my multifidus. Not a great position. If I correct that, I open up my knees a little bit, opens up my hips to create more space. I can find neutral. Then my low back can be neutral, and it stays neutral till I get to here, and I return to neutral all the way at the catch. And I have to work pretty hard to be able to stay in neutral with my multifidus, with my hip flexors, with my glutes a little bit, in order to stay in that position. But it's a much stronger, healthier position for my knees, my hips, and my lumbar spine. I feel a little awkward at first. This is the position where, just like my deadlift, pulling from the ground, or my clean, this is where I'm gonna have the most power start my pull compared to there. One more view here of my knees from the front. This is before. My knees are together. They're tracking inside of my feet. And this is the correction. Knees apart. The handles are actually coming and my arms are actually coming in between my knees. If I were to really exaggerate it for a person that had a lot of knee discomfort or really had a hard time finding a neutral back position, I'd take them out a little bit wider than I might otherwise do. So that's my strong position where my glutes are activated, my hips are open, my lumbar spine stable, and I can really drive with each pull from that position. So while not everyone needs to row with exaggerated form, I think people that are injured really show us what our body likes the best, where we're the strongest and where we're the least likely to get injured, because they have pain telling them that one position is not so great for them, whereas the other position is actually much healthier, much more preventive of injury risk. And in a lot of cases, it's actually a stronger position, especially over time if you're looking for longevity, long-term fitness over the course of your life. Rowing with this type of technique is going to put less pressure on your knees, hips, and back. Thanks for tuning back into StabilityWOD today. I appreciate you following me all the way through this multifidus conversation, and I'm looking forward to shifting gears to another area that is probably one of the least stable parts of our body naturally tomorrow, and that's the shoulder. If you like what you saw today, click the like button. I'd love to hear your comments, and please take a second to subscribe. See you tomorrow.